Welcome to. No worries. Welcome to the Finance and Audit Committee of July 20th regular meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with Finance and Audit Committee members, city staff, and members of the public participating in the downtown conference room and participating remotely. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our newly appointed commissioners, Lynn Bramlett. I don't think we have Jayanta today.
No.
Okay, Jayanta's not here, and then Jeff LaRoe. Welcome. So moving on to roll call, I would like to introduce staff, Finance and Audit Committee members present. Lynn, Michael Demas, Susanna's not here either. Do we have a quorum? Four. Okay, good. All right, sounds good. And then Jeff and myself, Carol Wong. Staff present include Assistant City Manager Stephen Stolpe, Interim Finance and Budget Manager Ronnie Singh, and also Management Analyst Adrian Patino. Staff Liaison Adrian Patino, would you please provide instructions to the Finance and Audit Committee and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Vice Chair Wong and the members of the Finance and Audit Committee. Welcome everyone to the July 20th regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee, and thank you for attending. At this time, we ask that the virtual members of the Finance and Audit Committee please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You'll control your own webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the Finance and Audit Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on an item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on the item that you wish to speak. For virtual participants, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. For those calling in from a landline or a cell phone, please press *9. And for those in person, please complete the speaker card and return the card to staff. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
Great. So I'd also like to acknowledge Commissioner Matt Norrington, who is online with us today. So moving on to public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the Finance and Audit Committee on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the committee once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The committee cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the advisory body cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment, other than to provide general information.
And sorry, just before we move on to public comment, we have Commissioner Matt Norrington, who is participating remotely using Assembly Bill 2449, Just Cause. Commissioner Norrington, can you please provide a brief description of your use of Just Cause?
Yeah, I had a last-minute child care emergency that I needed to take care of.
Thank you. And for anyone who would like to make a public comment for an item that is not on tonight's agenda, please engage the raise hand feature. If you are calling in, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete the speaker card and return it to staff. I'm seeing no hands or cards. Commissioner Wong, or Vice Chair Wong, you may continue.
Great. We will begin this evening with 2 presentations. Staff Liaison Adrian, do we have any public comment on the presentations and proclamations?
Or any members of the public who would like to comment on items D1 or D2 of tonight's agenda, please engage the raise hand feature, press *9, or return a speaker card to staff. I am seeing no requests for comment.
Okay. I will now move on to introduce interim finance and budget manager Ronnie Singh to introduce the item.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carol. So welcome to our new members. We'll go ahead and get started with few updates. We'll just wait to keep putting up the slide here. The City Council at the February 14th meeting directed staff to update the member composition of the Finance and Audit Committee by retaining the FAC membership to 7 members, but removing the 2 City Council members as voting members. And then appointing the City Council member liaison, who is not a voting member, selecting Council member Maria Dor on February 28th. Next slide, please. At the January 27th council meeting, council amended the City Council policy, renaming the Finance and Audit Committee to the Finance and Audit Committee Commission. As well as revising the term of its members from 2 years to 4 years, taking effect during the 2025 annual recruitment. Next slide. Per the council policy, FAC is charged primarily to support delivery of timely, clear, and comprehensive reporting of the city's fiscal status to the community at large. Commission priorities are to review the process for periodic financial reporting to the City Council and public as needed, review financial audit and annual financial report to the City Council and the public, review the financial audit and annual financial report with the city's external auditors, review of the resolution of prior year audit findings, review of the auditor selection process and scope as needed. Next slide. So City Council policy defines the policies and procedures and roles and responsibilities as such. Within the specific areas of responsibilities, each advisory body has a primary role of advising the council on policy matters or reviewing specific issues and carrying out assignments as directed by the council or prescribed by law. Upon referral by the council, commission shall study referral matters and return their recommendations and advice to council, and council may authorize staff to provide certain services to aid in the study. Upon its own initiative, commission shall identify and raise issues to the council's attention and from time to time explore any pertinent matters and make recommendations to the council. So any recommendations, requests, and reports from commissioners to City Council as needed near the beginning of council meetings, commissions may present any recommendations or status reports and request direction and support under advisory body reports. Such requests need to be communicated with staff liaison in advance, including any written materials to ensure that they're listed on the agenda and distributed. Items provided to council must be approved by the majority of the commission at the commission meeting before the scheduled council meeting. So council will receive such reports and recommendations and provide directions. City clerk will transmit to the designated staff liaison directions provided by council. And next slide. So as mentioned earlier, council member Maria Dor was appointed as the council member liaison to facilitate communication between the City Council and advisory body. She may elect to attend commission meetings. Unfortunately, she couldn't attend this one periodically to observe the activities or maintain communication with the commission chair on a regular basis. And the city has designated staff liaison Adrian Patino to act as a liaison between the commission and council. And then a couple more things. So requests from commission members determined by the staff liaison to take 1 hour or more of staff time to complete must be directed by the City Council. And the commission shall not become involved in the administrative or operational matters of city departments. Members may not direct staff to initiate major programs, conduct large studies, or establish department policy. The responsibility for setting policy and allocating city resources rests with the City Council. So the city council policy was included in the packet that was distributed. We also have hard copies behind you if you wanted to grab one. And that concludes the onboarding. So we'll pass it back on to Vice Chair.
Great, thank you, Ronnie. Now let me introduce Management Analyst Adrian Patino to introduce the next item.
And thank you, Vice Chair Wong. So our second presentation will be on the city's investment portfolio and investment policies given by the city's investment advisor from Inside Investment, Dave Whithelm.
Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate that. We've got a presentation here. We're going to cover a number of topics. Marvin and Adrian asked me to touch on a few things: the current economic environment, the current status of the portfolio, also talking a little bit about the investment policy, and then a section on our ESG methodology that we use at Insight. And for those that are not familiar with Insight, Insight is a division of Bank of New York. We're their investment advisory division that focuses primarily on fixed income securities. And I work within the division within that's the public sector group that works exclusively with public entities on their portfolios. And with that, let's drop down to page 3. It's the first page with the graphs on it. Well, that's perfect. Thank you. So here's a graph of what we call a yield curve. And what it does is it simply graphs the return on different maturities of the Treasury sector. So you have 3 months, 6 month, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, all the way out to 10-year Treasuries. And we graph the returns. The light green line, that's the returns from 2022 at the end of June. And you can see rates are up substantially at the end, and the dark green line is the yields on different treasuries, different maturities at the end of June for 2023. So yields are up substantially. And in fact, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 4% over the last year. So that's the largest increase in about 40 years. And it's primarily due to fight inflation. They're trying to slow the economy down, so to bring inflation more in line with their target. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's turn to the next slide, slide number 4. This is just an overview slide, some key takeaways. Our expectation of what these different measures, GDP for 2023, we're thinking it's going to be about 1.6%. That may get revised upward to around 2% as the economy continues to look a little bit stronger, but we expect the economy to weaken in 2024. Consumer Price Index, which is also a measure of inflation, it's right now running, at this time it was running at 4%. It's actually running at 3% right now, and we expect that to be around 2.7% in 2024. The Fed rate, the overnight rate on federal funds is currently at about 5.25. It's going to go up to 5.5 here at the end of July at the next meeting, which is coming up in about a week and a half. And we expect that to be about 100 basis points lower at the end of 2024. So those are the takeaways. But let's talk a little bit more about some of the details. Let's drop down the next slide and talk about where the economy is currently and what's been happening. The next slide shows all the different areas that we've been seeing increases in employment in just since January. So this is just the first 6 months of this year. And these numbers are in thousands. So the first one, healthcare and social assistance added 385,000 new jobs in the first 6 months of this year. And you can see almost every sector up. I would point out the second one, which is hospitality and leisure, which is a discretionary, as everyone would know. Travel is kind of a discretionary thing. So hospitality and leisure, that's also doing very strong. That was one of the things, areas that was hit the hardest during the pandemic, and that's bounced back rather dramatically. And in fact, when we look at TSA numbers are back up to 2019 level for people checking through TSA. So the travel and leisure industry really has sprung back quite substantially. And that's a good indicator that tells us the economy is strong and consumer spending is pretty strong. If you look at the bottom, information technology, and this is, in the Bay Area, this is particularly an area of concern. That's one of the area that's been losing jobs. And you can't read the newspaper without seeing, Meta's laying off and Amazon's laying off and Google's laying off some people. But the thing that you don't see there is that those people get laid off and they end up getting new jobs right away. And so continuing claims on unemployment really haven't gone up. And in fact, just today, they reported some numbers and it dropped by 9,000 new applicants for unemployment. So unemployment's been at a very low level and it's been very strong and really at almost 50-year lows. Now, unemployment's a lagging indicator, so it doesn't tell us where the economy is necessarily going in the future, but it is a strong indicator of what's happening in the current economy. So, I mean, the economy is exceptionally strong, and I will note, stronger than anyone had anticipated. They surveyed, Bloomberg did a survey last October of all the economists. 96% of them predicted that there would be a recession within 12 months. And right now, there's not a recession in sight. In fact, many of the CEOs are coming out speaking about their earnings for the second quarter right now. That's a big earnings week this week. And they're talking about, what are they going to do and what are their plans for the future, not for a recession, but for what we call a soft landing, which is that the economy slows down, it brings inflation down with it, but it doesn't go into recession. So the economy, particularly the job sector, looks pretty strong. Here's an area of concern. Let's turn to the next slide. This is why the Fed keeps raising interest rates. And I don't really like this slide because this kind of a spider web slide is I think complicated to read, but let me kind of walk you through it. On the outside there's 10 different measures of inflation. Right at the top, one you're very familiar with, a consumer price index. That's probably the most popular. And then core CPI, which is consumer price index minus food and energy. And they take food and energy out because it's the most volatile components of it. So they're trying to get more of that real inflation read when they take out food and energy. The next one is PCE, and that's personal consumption expenditures. And that is actually the measure favored by the Federal Reserve. So that's kind of the one they look at. And in fact, they really look at the next one down, which is core PCE, which is PCE without food and energy. Now, when you look at the headline CPI number, hey, it was this dark green line is where it was in May of 22. The light green line is where it was in May of 23. So it kind of shows you the change. The blue line is what the Fed's target is. Their target is to have 2% inflation. Well, the headline number a year ago was around 9%. It was below 9% in May, but it went up in June and July up to that 9% level of last year. It's since dropped down to the 4% level in May. And I will tell you, since we produced this graph just last week, it dropped down to 3%. So that's really big improvement, right? You went from 9% on CPI down to 3%. You say, man, that means inflation's really dropping and it's getting close to that Fed target of 2%. Yes, but a lot of that's been linked to food and energy. Look at this, the core CPI number. The core CPI number last year was running around 6%. In May, it was just over 5%. Last week, it came out at 4.8%. Now, is it come down? Absolutely, it's come down. It's come down from some of the highs. It's not running at 6% and it's running below 5%. But it's running more than twice what the Federal Reserve wants it to be at. They want it to be at 2%. So depending on which measure of inflation you're looking at, really kind of tells you more insight to where the Fed is. If you look down to the one that the Fed really uses is this core PCE number, you see between last year and this year, that number really hasn't changed a lot at all. And right now, core PCE is running about 4.6%. Again, more than twice the Fed's target. So that's why the Federal Reserve is very likely to raise interest rates. If we look at the next, slide. What this is, it's called the dot plot. And every member on the Federal Open Market Committee, which is the committee responsible at the Fed for setting short-term interest rates, they get to pick where they think their federal funds rate is going to be at the end of the year in 23 and also at the end of the year in 24. At the end of the year in 23, they're picking it somewhere north of 5.5%. So if they raise the interest rate from, it's currently at 5.25, if they raise it next week after next to 5.5, they probably have a 50-50 chance of raising it again in September. And that'll probably be the final interest rate increase. And then next year, it's very likely to end the year 100 basis points lower. So the Federal Reserve is probably going to cut interest rates sometime next year, but we don't think that's going to happen until the middle of the year. So what does that mean to us in the portfolio? That means, look, we're probably at the top of the interest rate cycle. And in fact, we haven't seen these interest rate levels in about 16 years, really since before the great financial crisis back in 2008. So this is a good opportunity to extend the portfolio. And I've been working with the internal staff. We've actually been adding some duration to the portfolio, and we intend to add a little bit more duration to the portfolio. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next couple of slides. If we can move down to the next slide, that's going to talk about the portfolio. Right now, the portfolio is allocated about a third and a third and a third. We have about 30%, really about 29% in corporate bonds. That's high-grade corporate bonds. They have to be A or better to be in the portfolio, and that's by statute. And by statute, state statute, you cannot invest in more than 30% in corporate bonds. And the rest have to be in the other investments, primarily in government agency bonds and treasury bonds or government bonds on this portfolio. And so we've got about 37% in treasuries and about 34% in agencies. Typically that number would be flipped and we would have more in treasury or in agencies than we would have in treasuries. The problem right now is the main agencies are not Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac they're shrinking their balance sheets, so they're not issuing a lot of bonds. And the two remaining agencies, Federal Farm Credit and Federal Home Loan Banks, they're pretty smart guys. They realize we're at the top of the interest rate cycle. So they are issuing primarily floating rate bonds and callable bonds. And we don't want either of those in the portfolio because if interest rates really are going to go down over the next year, we want to lock these interest rates in. We don't want them to float downward, and we don't want those bonds to get called away from us. So we're doing fewer agencies than we normally would do right now, and we are buying more treasuries because the treasuries are not floating rate and they're not callable. You will note in the dark green bar at the very right side, the duration on that portfolio is about 1.9 years. We want to move it up to that 2% year range. We've had it at 2% earlier in the spring. It's a 2-year. I said 2%, 2-year area. So we want the duration to be roughly around that 2-year area. Neutral in a portfolio that's benchmarked against the 1 to 3 year treasuries is about 1.8 years. So we're a little long right now. We would like to get a little bit longer because we think we're at the high in the interest rate cycle. Let's drop down and look at the maturity distribution. And you can see the maturity distribution would typically peak out sort of in that 1 to 2 year area. It's now skewed a little bit to the right. It's now peaking out in more of that 2 to 3 year area, and we have a fair concentration in the 3 to 4 year area. Our intention over the next couple of months is to take the 5% that's coming due in the next 90 days and probably add it out more into that 4 and 5 year area, just to make the portfolio a little bit longer. But the portfolio is laddered, so we have bonds coming due all the time, and that provides some liquidity internally within the portfolio because there's always something coming due should we need that. With that, I'm going to change over to the policy and just talk a little bit about the policy before we talk about our ESG methodology. The policy, if we drop down the next slide, I would really get, I know this is a lot to read, but I would focus primarily on the objectives. Pardon me. The objectives of the policy are preservation of principal and the protection of that. That's number one. Number two is sufficient liquidity to meet the demands, both from a cash side and that you have within the cash flows of the policy and the requirements for the city. So preservation of capital, sufficient liquidity, and then a fair return, a valued return based on where the market is. And those are our primary objectives. You notice that nowhere within this policy are we talking anything about ESG. And we've brought this up in the past. We've had a discussion with the committee on it in the past, but we have not incorporated it into the policy at the direction of the committee so far. And it really doesn't take up space within the policy at this moment. Let's drop down to just some sort of a summary. This next page has sort of a summary of the policy, some of the limitations. We can do 100% in Treasury and U.S. Treasuries, government agency bonds and instrumentality bonds, and repurchase agreements. Those are very short-term overnight agreements that typically are used for bond proceeds. Not something we use in the typical term piece of the portfolio. And you can use governmental investment pools like your funds that you use in LAIF. You can have some allocation to certificates of deposit, although with the regional banking crisis, that's probably not as attractive at the moment. And commercial paper, that's a relatively short-term instrument that's less than 9 months. Since we're trying to lengthen the portfolio, we really don't have a lot of commercial paper in there at the moment. Municipal bond, money market funds, of course, and which we use in the custodial account, and also municipal securities. And you would say, hey, we're a tax-free entity. Why do we want to use municipal securities? But there are a number of municipalities that are now issuing taxable bonds, and sometimes they become attractive. They're quite often sought after so that their yields are not as attractive right now, but there are times when those bonds are attractive, and we might want to put those in the portfolio because, for a relative rating, it's nice to have an entity that has some taxable authority, and some of those bonds can be attractive at certain times. And the last item I would point out is medium-term notes. As I pointed out before, your threshold on that is A or better, and it has to be a maximum of 30% of the portfolio. Right now, we've got about 29% of the portfolio in medium-term notes. And with that, let's drop down and I'll run through the ESG methodology. I tell you what,
I was just gonna say, if anyone has
Yeah.
any questions, because it's been a lot of
Sure.
information. Thank you, Dave, but we do have some new commissioners here and I want to give them an opportunity to ask. any questions.
absolutely.
Well, I have some. You want to start? Well, I have some. So the city has, well, almost 200 million. I mean, it's almost in investments. So other than the reserves, how are these funds used? You know, in the city, and do we, in it, other than the interest, are we, is this kind of a growing fund? Is money being put into it?
I'll let the city internal staff, Marvin, probably is best to answer that. Sorry, Marvin.
Yeah. Good afternoon, commissioners. Now, this money is pooled in accordance with like the government code. So think of it kind of like you have your money in one bank account, but you have some money that you can only use for groceries, some you can only use for cars, pay your mortgage, right? So this money is all pooled, but it's governed by the way our fund structure is set up. So in other words, some money of this is for our impact fees, which you can't use to operate. Some money obviously is for housing loans that we have chosen to keep that there. Some money is for the general fund. So some money is for the capital projects that you definitely don't want to mess with. So give you a good idea, look at our adopted budget, that 23-24 budget. Look at the exhibit that's attached to it. And then you can kind of see all of the funds across the city. And then you can kind of give you an idea of where we can use the funds. This is all the city's money, other than the agency bonds we just issued. So the city also has about another 20 million in bonds that are not part of this portfolio. These are the Measure T monies. So it just, you can only use it for what it's allocated for, but we pull it together according to the rules so we can get more investments, earnings on it.
I'd like to ask about the cash. Considering the bank failures, and you never know if it's gonna happen to the bank we've got our money in. How are we gonna protect should we distribute that cash between a number of banks, or how do we make sure we don't get caught on that $250,000 limit?
That's a good question. Our money that you're looking at in the portfolio is held by U.S. Bank Custodial Services. And what they do is they have to comply with government code rules. And I think Dave can correct me on that, but I think they have to collateralize our money by 120% so they have to have reserves in that amount of money to hold government securities, just in the government code. So
Yeah, all these are held by separate third-party custodians. So all these are in direct investments and not part of the bank's investments. The only thing you would have exposure to is if you had like a checking account or a depository account at a bank. Now that's where you have some exposure. These investments that I was just outlining, those are all individual investments and held directly. They're your investments held by separate third parties, so they can't be touched. Now, I will say that in the last year, Marvin has really worked hard to reduce that exposure that you might have in the individual banking accounts and get those funds invested in direct securities, direct government securities. So that your exposure really has gone down, but I'm certain that they continue to monitor that, because anything over the FDIC limit, as Marvin was pointing out, has to be collateralized because they're governmental deposits, unlike individual deposits, which don't necessarily have to be collateralized. Although during the banking crisis this spring, the FDIC came out and said, hey, we're going to even insure essentially deposits over our insurance and $250,000 limit. So They did come out and say that, and so you still would be covered, but you're covered under the banking code by having collateralization, as Marvin pointed out.
Thank you.
Sure.
I also had a quick question. So, am I correct in understanding that the total balance on the investments has decreased, as of June 30 versus March 31st?
I don't think so. Are you looking at particular numbers or?
Oh,
You
I was
gotta-
just trying to jog my memory on what that number was
It
for
was
the
3
last
million.
quarter.
3 million. That's now a $5 million loss.
Okay, so if it was lower, then I was just kind of curious as to what were the drivers, because, obviously interest rates have gone up. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, interest rates went up a little bit between March, and they dropped substantially in March because of the banking crisis. Then they went back up in June because it looked like we're not going to go into recession, and it looks like we're going to have a soft landing. They have since come down again in July, so that's some market volatility that you're experiencing there. If we're correct that, and the Federal Reserve by their dot plots are correct, that interest rates are going to go down in 2024, that unrealized loss that you see within the portfolio will simply reverse around and flip around, and you'll have an unrealized gain. And just like you don't want to worry about the unrealized loss, you don't want to spend the unrealized gain either. So, I mean, it's, these are things that are just simply market movements. And most of the bonds in the portfolio, we intend to hold to maturity. So we're there not to trade them for capital gains, or losses, but to simply earn the interest on them. And if we hold them to maturity, there is no loss on the bonds.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm curious
Yeah.
what we pay Insight.
I didn't hear.
Is that appropriate to ask? I'm just curious what the fees are for the management.
We just renegotiated the contract. We're not under the new agreement yet, but I don't know if we started in July or not. We did sign the agreement. It's we pay 5 basis points on the first 150 million and 3 basis points on everything after that. So a basis point is 1/100 of 1%. So 1% would be 100 basis points. So we make 5/100ths of 1% on the first 150 million and 3/100ths of 1% on the next, the remaining balance.
And we put it, and we can put it in a little context. Insights, the way they're handling our portfolio, we should make about 4.5 million in interest earnings, and we paid them about $90,000. So they were very competitive in the new RP. They were very competitive in terms of us going with them. They beat out 5 other firms. I mean, huge firms. They beat them out. So they were very competitive.
Well, thank you. Well, we're glad. I mean, this is a volume business. I mean, there's no doubt about it for us. So, but we've been in this business for a long time. I've been doing it for almost 40 years now. And, we can't do it for every small entity out there, but for larger entities, we can give them a volume price and give them what we think is a lot of value.
Mike,
Dave, over about a year now, I think the stock market went down, then came back up close to 28%. I know the
Yeah.
statute will control, but is there any way of taking advantage of the equities?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Prohibited by state statute. Absolutely, you can only be in fixed income. No other way for any of these operating funds. Now,
Even
in
spider,
the pension, nope, not even spiders. And I like spiders too. I'm a big indexing guy with my personal portfolio. You can take advantage of it for the pension portfolio, and if you're in CalPERS, then yeah, they do that for the pension portfolio, but you're not allowed to do that in the operating portfolio. And one of the reasons is, you just never know. There's no final date on a stock. And so you just don't know what the return is. Look, granted, over time, stocks are going to do very well, but these are operating funds. So you're going to need to have these operating funds, and look at just even in fixed income, some of the market fluctuation. You've got a $5 million unrealized loss just in fixed income that's 5 years and under. Imagine the operating loss you would have in a portfolio if you had equities in it. You'd have big swings. So yeah, the statutes are very clear on that. I mean, there's no wiggle room whatsoever. Very limited things you can go into. High grade governments, treasuries agencies, high grade corporates, a little bit. You can do mortgage-backed securities, but they can only be 5 years out in final maturity. That really doesn't leave much in the mortgage-backed market for things to be available. It can be done in the portfolio, but there's really not a lot of opportunity for it. And it's a lot of work for internal staff. So
Now, Mr. Demois, the way we get around that is that we create irrevocable trust. So for instance, like if we're trying to cap, like if our net pension liability, if we're trying to cap our OPEB liability for healthcare, right? We get around that by pulling money out of this portfolio, putting it into irrevocable trust, but that's still risky because those trusts are invested heavily invested equities. So essentially you can lose principal. So the legislature don't let us play those games with the operating portfolio.
that's right.
thank you.
But as you pointed out, you can't do it with your OPEB money, and you can do it, to some degree with your pension funds. But with operating funds, they're really strict about it. Let's talk a little bit about this ESG, and we could do an hour literally on ESG and all the nuances of it. And I know we don't have time here. Just to touch on it, E, S, and G, environmental, social, governance. That's what it stands for. So environmental considerations. Here are some of the key issues that we look at. Social responsibility, responsibility to employees, responsibility to supply chains, responsibility to any other stakeholders. And then governance is, how's the board created? Is there fair pay and fair equity? Is the board diverse? Is the board, made up of people from management or friends of people from management, or is it more of an independent board? And so these companies, and basically the ESG really applies to corporations. And so it's really applying to the corporate sector within the portfolio. And for every portfolio we manage, whether they're ESG sensitive or not, we create ESG scores and pay for the background to do ESG scores. And primarily we get it from outside sources. If you would drop down to the next box. Well, this is just how it blends in with this decision. We look at the valuations, we do some financial analysis, and we take some ESG factors into consideration. Let's drop down the next slide. So this looks at different analytic firms. We get from 3 different outside vendors, Sustainalytics, EV, and MSCI, which are big providers of background ESG information and basically ESG ratings on independent ratings on companies. But as you can see, they're all over the place. Like this ALD, which is a car rental, an equipment rental company. Look, they rate them on a scale of 1 is good, 2 is less good, 3 is median, 4 is kind of bad, and 5 is on the naughty list. So 1's best, 5's the worst. Well, you can see even from all these different external providers, they're kind of all over the place on what their ratings are for each one of these firms. You look at even General Electric, you know, Sustainalytics and rates them a 3, EV rates them a 2, which is good. But MSCI rates them a 4. Insight then takes these 3 external ratings, puts some of their own, we have a whole ESG team. They put some of their own insight in it to weighting the various factors given a particular company, and we come up with our own internal rating, both ESG, ES&G ratings, and an overall rating for the company. But as you can see, there's a lot of variation in that. And so there's no real standardization right now. Everyone's kind of doing it different. This is like, I hate to say it, it's like a little bit like the Wild West. And, you know, I know we're being recorded, so I have to be careful because, you know, ESG is getting very popular, but it's still in its infancy stage and there's not a lot of consistency. Let's jump to the next slide and I'll show you some of the dispersion. So on this slide on the right, this is all credit issuers. So this is like the big 3, like Moody's, Fitch, and S&P. And you'll see there's some differences in how they rate, and they have credit ratings for each one of these companies that are here on the left-hand side. But they're pretty tightly clustered. They're pretty consistent. Where if you go over to the ES&G ratings from different providers, look, there's a wide dispersion. So it's hard to get an ESG and get it consistently. It's not like credit ratings where they tend not to change very much and they tend to be clustered relatively tightly. ESG ratings from various companies, people are measuring different things. And what happens is, even from quarter to quarter, I track these and put them in a report for Marvin. And I will tell you that from quarter to quarter, they will change. And from a portfolio management standpoint, sometimes you buy something that's a 2 or a 3, and then it gets downgraded, and it gets downgraded to a 3 or a 4. And, you know, you're disappointed about it because what we don't do in the portfolio is we don't sell them. So, you know, our focus is to buy higher ESG scoring companies, but if they start to fall down, we still hold them in the portfolio to maturity because we don't want to be a forced seller to sell them out of the portfolio at the possibility that it could be at a loss. So we want to hold them into the portfolio. Now, if they're scoring poorly, we won't buy new ones and we won't put those into the portfolio. But we think over time, that gets you a better ESG score. The only reason we're doing it with Menlo's portfolio, even though it's not in the policy, we understand there's some ESG sensitivity. So we're trying to get, when we buy bonds for the portfolio, we're trying to get better ratings. There's companies that score higher on ESG. But I will tell you, it's challenging because those ratings do move and they're not necessarily uniform across the industry. And I know we've got a whole team working on it and they're trying to do their best job, but it can be challenging. Yeah.
Oh, I just had a quick question. It says here 2019. So is this from 4 years ago or?
Yeah,
that-
this happens to be this is an older slide, but it still applies. They have a wide dispersion in ratings. And any other questions on ESG? I'm sorry, I can't be real definitive about it and say it's real tight. Yes,
Are you able to hear me?
yes.
Okay. I understand Florida rejected ESG. And I've talked to my own brokers and Wells Fargo, and they agree with Florida. And I would say, at least in the committee that I've been on here for a while, we decided Menlo Park does not want to be ESG investors. However, if people want to invest in ESG, I think their personal portfolio, they should go ahead and do that. But we're representing a population here. Some of them disagree. And because of the fact that there's really no standard, I would say that we have decided not to consider ESG in our investments.
So I don't think we made an active
No, here's
decision.
what we did. We said, we should put together a group to study this.
Yeah.
But until some group studies it and proves me wrong, I'd like to have you know that it's not important right now.
Okay. Well, I no, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, we're simply tracking it at the moment. We are, trying to generally select higher rated companies than lower ones. But I will say that the objectives of the portfolio haven't changed. And so what Florida's, I happen to be in Florida at the moment. I'm in Fort Lauderdale. I'm down here seeing a lot of our clients down here, and we are having this discussion every day. So our primary objectives haven't changed, which is safety, liquidity, and yield. What Florida was concerned about was that you would override those safety and performance objectives with ESG objectives. In other words, saying we make ESG more important than safety, liquidity, and yield. And we have never done that in any of our portfolios, even here in Florida. We've said, no, safety, liquidity, yields are the primary objectives, and they remain the primary objectives in your portfolio. ESG is simply another consideration, but it will never supersede the primary objectives, which are safety, liquidity, and return. In other words, we're not subjecting the return to ESG considerations. And I think that's the big thing that Governor DeSantis here was worried about, because there were people that were trying to drive ESG considerations above return considerations. And because they're public portfolios, we just don't want to do that. We think that you really need to have, and the same thing in the Department of Labor came out and said, look, these with ERISA funds, which are for retirement portfolios, you really have to focus on the return, because that's what you owe to the constituents. If you want to take ESG in consideration because you think it's a risk to the portfolio, because you think there are possible risks involved to a company, then you can look at ESG, but you can't let it override the safety and liquidity and return considerations. And I think that's kind of our position, sure.
So I think Lynn noted that we do have a parking lot item to think about ESG ratings, and we can chat about that more when we get to the work plan to
We have
see
a parking lot?
Yeah.
parking lot item on the work plan.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
something that you
Oh, I
can
see.
attend.
Yeah, we
so
can
that we
chat about
discuss.
that when we talk about the work plan to see if we do want to move forward with the subcommittee and all of that. Yeah. Thank you.
Where is that? Oh, I see, okay. Parking lot. I thought you were talking about a parking lot.
No, not a physical. Literal.
And with that, let me know if you have any other considerations. I'd love to come out and visit with you in person. And I think Marvin and I had talked about maybe doing something and doing some training later in the year here and over the next couple months. But I love to come out and see my clients in person because I think there's a much better than doing it, by video. And I'd look forward to try and make one of your meetings so that we can meet in person a little bit. Sometimes the dialogue's a little bit easier. Like I said, I'm spending all week this week down in Florida seeing people, so.
Okay, so I think this concludes the presentation. So moving on to regular business.
Can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
So it was in the investment policy. So competitive transactions section, is the city making investment transactions or are these done by Insight?
Insight does it.
Okay. Is it?
We document, and we document every transaction that we make. On the trade ticket, it has every broker that made a bid on it. And we typically go to at least minimum 3 brokers, and we record that on the trade ticket. And everything's actually done on an electronic platform now, as opposed to broker to broker, but it is all recorded on the trade tickets for every transaction.
Well, I should have queued it up better. So it says here, each shall be competitively transacted with authorized broker dealers. At least 3 broker dealers shall be contacted for each transaction. And I just wondered if we turn it over to you, is that the process here? Do you know what I'm talking
It is because,
Okay.
because we're an investment advisor. We're not a broker dealer. So
Okay.
as an investment advisor, we go out through electronic platforms. We have 114 different counterparties that we work with, counterparties being broker dealers. So all those transactions are done with those counterparties on a competitive basis. So our job is to go out there and get the competitive pricing on your behalf with the broker dealers.
Any other questions before we let Dave go?
No.
Great, I'll move on to regular business. Under regular business, the Finance and Audit Committee considers recommendations from the city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require Finance and Audit Committee approval. The first regular business item is, and I'll introduce Management Analyst Adrian Patino to introduce this item.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Wong. So our first regular business item is to select a chair and a vice chair for the Finance and Audit Commission. So a little bit of background here. On April 25th and May 23rd, the City Council appointed new members to this commission to fill the vacant seats. And we have the members currently listed here on the screen. At the April 20th FAC meeting, the former chair concluded his service and the FAC voted to make Carol Wong the vice chair. The City Council policy, which governs all of the city's advisory bodies, states that a chair and vice chair must be selected in May of each year to serve through the calendar year. And each commission and committee will annually rotate its chair and vice chair. So the chair of each commission and committee presides over all of these meetings. And as you've seen, Vice Chair Wong do this evening, lead us through those meetings. If the chair is not available, then the vice chair would assume those duties. Many commissions choose to kind of mirror what the city council does in rotating the vice mayor and mayor positions. So the vice chair would ascend to become the chair, and then a new vice chair would be selected typically the most senior member of the commission, but it's totally up to the commission to decide how they would like to how they would like to carry out that process.
So, any clarifying questions from the Finance and Audit Committee before taking this to public comment? Yeah, okay. And then, staff, Adrian, do we have any public comment?
If you would like to comment on agenda item E1, select the chair and vice chair, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Dial *9 if you are calling in, or complete a speaker card and return it to staff. And I'm seeing no hands or cards at this time, so you may continue.
Okay, so I'll now open it up for the committee to discuss. We need to nominate a chair and vice chair, or potentially a 12-month period. And then I think the second decision is whether we want to do it through rotation for every 12 months. So maybe we can start with the second part first, since it's more structural, and then we can kind of go back to the first.
What is the second part first?
Oh, the second part is whether we want to do it on a rotational basis or sort of have a chair and vice chair serve their full term. So the full term would be 4 years.
Oh, I see.
Yes, so it would
Okay.
mean that if someone was nominated as chair
Right.
or vice chair, they would be serving for 4 years instead of 12 months if we decided to do it on a rotational basis.
I personally think 1 year at a time is best.
Any other thoughts from other commissioners?
I'm just curious about the incremental amount of work associated with being vice chair versus just being on the commission itself.
I can speak to that since I've been vice chair for a day. It is incremental, but because with the help of Adrian, he did send me some really good notes, and I just sort of go through it and make sure, all of you get a chance to speak and ask questions when appropriate. So I wouldn't say it's a lot of incremental work.
Okay.
I have to ask a question. So the other commissions, do they have one person then serve the whole 4 years? Or my understanding is customarily every year it's different, and that was even in the policy. Is that
Usually
true?
rotates every year
Okay,
in May.
okay.
And a lot of the terms end in April, so
Yeah.
it just makes sense
Okay.
to rotate it.
Now, when you say rotate, does that mean it then becomes open for nomination again, so the same person can become twice in a row? Or does it have to rotate?
It's
It's up to each commission's
by majority vote. So
discretion, yeah.
Okay, so my preference would be is that, somebody's doing a really good job. And, they want to maintain a second term. I don't know that we necessarily want to restrict them from doing that. Or empower them. It's just a matter of, we can make that decision at that moment in time, would be my thought in terms of optimal flexibility, but I'm, new here and open to whatever the committee would.
So typically the rotation, we would have the chair and the vice chair. And if the chair leaves, then obviously the vice chair can be in the chair role, and then we'll select the vice chair, and then we just do the rotations that way.
Okay.
But it's by majority vote, so you can vote. Whoever.
So I do have a question. I know the terms have now been extended from 2 years to 4 years. So potentially if you go, I believe for these roles, you can do 2 terms. So potentially there could be an 8-year term for a member. Am I correct?
I believe so. We can double check.
Yeah,
on
we
that.
can
Yeah,
confirm with the city clerk's office.
Okay.
yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to, if we make a decision, then someone might get stuck with it for 8 years, but. Yeah, but it sounds like since there's a yearly sort of review, we would be able to change that decision.
Thank you.
Okay, so, do I need a motion in terms of the decision for us to do an annual rotation or?
We need motions to nominate a chair and a vice chair.
Okay. So I will nominate myself as either chair or vice chair. So if anyone else wants to self-nominate for the role or a particular role.
Well, I'm happy to second it for you as the chair, since you've been the vice chair. And, you know, I personally think seniority is important too, and I think most of us are new, the remaining people other than you. So,
And Matt's also.
oh,
here.
okay, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't be there in person.
Well, who is
But
interested?
I would third the nomination for you as chair, actually. So
Thank you, Matt.
with the exemplary service that you've performed as vice chair for one day.
I'll
Thank you.
nominate Matt for vice chair.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll second it.
Great.
okay. All right, then I'll put this into a formal motion. How do I do the motion? So let me state the motion, which is nomination of Carol Wong as chair and Matt Normington as vice chair for the next 12 months for the Finance Audit Committee. So I have someone to second.
I'll second.
All right, so we have Jeff seconding. So all in favor, aye.
aye.
All right, motion is passed. Thank you. And then moving on to the next, oh.
I have a,
sorry.
so how do we suggest agenda topics? I mean, how has that come about? Or is that something we'll discuss later?
Ronnie, do you want to take this one?
we can, I think we can discuss it at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
To take notes, but you'll be working with Adrian, who then does the draft agenda, and then provides it to the chair. So it could be topics that we can include in the upcoming agenda, or it would be parking lot items that can come up in the next meeting.
So moving on in regular business, I think the second item is to approve the April 2023 Finance and Audit Commission regular meeting minutes, which have been attached. Any questions on the agenda, the minutes from the last meeting? It looks like I will ask Adrian to please state the motion.
Well, I just want to comment, it seemed very short, 45 minutes, and, you know, given all the, especially the concerns from the the budget shortfall, et cetera, it just, well, maybe when we talk with the work plan, but it just seems this is and consistent with your goal setting meeting too, where the consultant said these advisory committees can do, can help with research and other things that could be helpful. So I was just really surprised that it was only 45 minutes long, especially given how important the financial matters are.
So a little bit of further context. At the last meeting, we did start going through the work plan, and I think because the chair, Brian, it was his last meeting of the term, so he sort of wanted to hand this off to new members as this is all a fresh start. If there are issues that we want to put on the agenda or the work plan, he'd like the opportunity for new members to sort of participate in all that. So we started talking about the work plan, but we didn't make any decisions just because, there was no point in making a decision that he wasn't there to sort of follow through on. So that's why it was slightly shorter, but we did start talking about the work plan, and we did start considering formation of subcommittees. Yeah, so my comment on the minutes was, I believe we formed a subcommittee to look at the investment policy, and I see this on the agenda again. So I was wondering if, we've already done that, and do we still need to do it?
So I know we
Meeting.
did start talking about it and then realized that it wasn't on the agenda, so we couldn't really form it.
Okay.
So with that note, we said we would bring it back on the agenda, and that's why it's here on the agenda today, so we can start discussing it again.
Okay,
It has
that
to be
makes,
officially on the agenda.
okay, that makes total sense. I was like, am I not remembering? Okay, so, any other questions on last meeting's minutes? Okay, well, I'll have Adrian to please state the motion.
Motion to approve the April 20th, 2023 Finance and Audit Commission regular meeting minutes.
I'll make a
Alright.
motion to approve.
I'll
Anyone?
second it.
Great.
I,
I think I should abstain. I wasn't here. Isn't that correct? Or is that, if we weren't here, should I abstain? I mean, what is the,
you can,
okay, okay.
All right. I think the motion is passed by a majority in the room. Okay, moving on to the third item of regular business, and that is to review the June 30th, 2023 investment reports and recommend receipt by the city council. And I'd like to introduce interim finance director Marvin Davis to introduce the item.
Good evening, committee. This is the city's June 30th investment report. And so we'll just go through this, a few highlighted areas that we'll just point out on the report. You see your portfolio value at 192 million. This is the fair value at the time. This is less than the amortized cost. Amortized cost is 198 million. However, as we pointed out, before, the unrealized loss is not something we're going to realize because we're going to keep our investments to term. So this is a non-cash loss. So in that regard, you see LAIF at about 10 million here. LAIF is the state's investment pool. And so the LAIF fund in itself is very liquid. And so in that regard, we could withdraw that 10 million in 2 days from LAIF. And so LAIF is very liquid. You see the other securities in terms of where we invested, corporates, government agencies, you see the percentages, those are in line with the policy guidelines. And we talked a little bit about the fair value. Our portfolio is compared to the average maturity for Treasury. And so in that regard, our portfolio is outperforming the 2-year Treasury. And that's kind of how we benchmark it. And then, Dave mentioned the ESG a little bit. As you can see how volatile that rating is, I don't think it would be advisable to try and put that as part of the portfolio policy. That'd probably be a bad idea. So we went through that a little bit. And so I don't know if we have a next slide.
Just this one for this.
Just this one, yeah. So in that regard, that's our portfolio. Our portfolio, we report this quarterly. And so Dave and I are very good managing it, making sure that it's in accordance with the policy, as well as making sure that there's good diversification among the agency, among the investments. So yeah, the portfolio is doing very well. In addition to that 192 million, we also have about 20 million in our commercial checking account. So that's not part of our portfolio, but it is money that the city has access to. And so in that regard, the city is well equipped for liquidity issues, and in addition to safety issues. So the portfolio is doing well. And I don't know if you guys remember, maybe about a year ago, the portfolio was only about 140 million. Now the portfolio is almost 200. So you can see how we move things in accordance to make sure that the portfolio size right. Make sure we'll take advantage of things as they come along. So
Great.
This is our portfolio.
Thank you, Marvin. Any clarifying questions from Mike?
Marvin, I guess I don't understand how the investment portfolio is managed. Because I thought that Dave and Insider was doing all the transactions, but I'm wrong about that, am I? Actually, you're doing the transactions?
I'm giving him authority to do them.
I see, okay.
So, yeah, he's recommending as we have maturities happening, he recommend replacing things. As Dave and I both see things happening in the portfolio, we recommending not going certain ways, but Dave can't do anything without my authorization.
Okay, now the other thing is, you know, that I'm fairly new here also, you know, you think you're new, I'm also new. So I don't, I've never seen what I call a statement. For example, I have a portfolio. Wells Fargo sends me at the end of the month a statement. Do we get one?
Yes, we have a statement. If you look at attachment B, you can think of attachment B is our monthly statement. So when you look at look at attachment B, this is for the month of June. So on page E-3.8, you see the opening balance at the beginning of June of how much?
I'm trying to get to that.
187, 459, 165.
This
There you go.
year,
Just making sure you guys are following me. Okay, so you can see the opening balance, you can see
The
the
performance summary.
mhm.
I think you got it.
with the staff report package.
Mhm. So the portfolio received how much in receipts during that 1 month? How much in receipts did it receive during that 1 month?
Is it rhetorical? Or you want me to answer?
I want you to answer.
Oh, okay. Sorry, 251,770.64.
There you go. So if you think of that and times that by 12, that kind of gives you an idea of the interest earnings that are going to be coming in through this, not in addition to LAIF. So like I was saying, the portfolio at the size that it is, we estimate about 4.5 million will be coming in next year. And obviously those are going to be used in different funds. The general funds portion is about 2 million. And so it's important that we keep the portfolio at a size that's big enough to generate that.
Does it also include the commissions and expenses and those things? Where would we find those?
The expenses are not as part of this particular statement. But as I mentioned, the fees for Insight for Living, for Insight Investments is about 90,000 a year. So that fee's about
I'm talking about broker. A typical broker would also charge a commission, don't they?
The broker's fees are discounted by the time you buy the investment. So when you buy the bond, the broker has it on his portfolio and he sells it to you less his discounted amount already. So
I'm just confused because you'd usually see at the top here, Bank of New York. You know, certain amount of stock or bonds were purchased. The commission on those bonds were X, Y, and Z. Does that appear somewhere where we can look at that and say, you know, we could be doing better, or how do we analyze this? I'm not following it.
what we have is that when Dave and I determined to which bond to buy, we have 3 quotes on the ticket. And so in other words, the trade ticket itself has quotes from 3 different brokers. And so Dave and I can see which broker is requiring a deeper discount than the other guy. And then we typically will go with the broker that's not discounting it as deep, you know, because everybody got to make a living. Nobody works for free. So the broker that is transacting for the city, he's got his license with the SEC, right? As a licensed broker. Otherwise, you can't do a transaction. So it's there. It's just a matter of how deep you want to kind of look at it, but it is there.
Well, I have a few follow-on questions. So On this activity performance summary, did Menlo Park prepare this or did Insight prepare it?
This is
I mean,
inside.
Okay, and then where it says opening balance income received, is that interest payments?
Yes,
Primarily? Okay,
that's cash we're receiving.
from interest,
Yes, from,
this portfolio, okay.
yes.
I think what you asked is the US Bank what account statement. Is this one you're looking for?
I don't know. Is
It will
that
show-
our cash? Is that our cash account?
No, this is the account holding for the investment.
Oh,
It will show the interest and the long-term gain loss. Changing the investment value. Some information
what
like
page is that?
I don't think it's included in this package. I could send it to agent, then maybe agent could share.
Okay,
Any other questions for now?
it's complicated.
It's a lot behind it because a lot of these funds we're buying, they've been held on brokers' portfolios, right? And the broker holds that bond and he's looking at what's happening with new issues coming out, right? And so he goes, okay, I'm better than the new issue coming out. I'm going to sell you my bond, right? Some of them we go right to the treasury and we can buy it right from the agencies. So it is all interrelated. But the biggest thing is that you pointed out, Mr. Demas, is that we're getting a different, maybe 2-3 quotes before we put the trigger on any particular investment,
Are you an employee of the city or are you with Insight?
No, I'm with the city. I'm with the city.
I
Yeah.
see.
Well, I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Overnight repo, what is that?
You said the overnight what now?
Repo,
Where are you?
right here.
I
Okay,
think Dave
Next
sort of
page.
talked about their like overnight repurchase, very
Oh,
short
okay,
term.
okay, okay, all right.
Marvin, you might
I
be
guess I
able to
missed
give a
it.
better explanation than me.
no, that's a good explanation. That's that fast money. That,
Yes.
that kind of that overnight money where the feds are kind of
Okay.
selling to commercial banks and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
So staff liaison, Adrian, do we have any public comment?
If you would like to comment on item E3, review the June 30th, 2023 investment reports and recommend receipt by city council, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Dial *9 if you are calling from a cell phone or landline, or complete a speaker card and return it to staff. I am seeing no hands or cards.
Okay, I think the next thing is staff liaison, Adrian, to state the motion.
So motion to recommend receipt of the June 30th, 2023 investment reports by city council.
I'll put forth that motion. Would anyone like to second?
Second.
Yeah, second. All in favor?
Aye.
We've received. Great. Moving on, regular business. The next one is to consider forming an investment policy subcommittee. I'll have management analyst Adrian Patino introduce the item.
I think we have the review of the investment policy first before we have to.
Oh, sorry, missed that one. So back to you, Marvin. Yeah.
Okay, so committee, thank you again. We will look back at the reviewed investment policy. And we have a few slides that we'll just kind of highlight some of the important parts of the policy. And so we look at the next slide. Okay, so our investment, I'm not going to read through the particular things. I'll just indicate investment policy is adopted by council, and it is authorized in law in terms of what the city's operating portfolio can invest in. The purpose of the policy, the biggest things is that we would preserve the principal of the portfolio. Then also we would look at the liquidity of the portfolio. And then we would look at the return of the portfolio in that order. So, and then the reason how we are able to adhere to that is we follow these state guidelines. We cannot invest in equities like Mr. DeMoss was, he said, why can't we get into equities? So in this instance, the legislature has determined that it's too risky for a city's operating portfolio to invest in equities, right? So therefore it doesn't allow that. And then the liquidity, we make sure that we have enough regarding the budget. So we look at our annual budget in terms of how many big projects we have coming up. And we balance that in terms of liquidity versus going long. And so just give you an example, if we knew we were going to spend about $40 million on a capital project next budget year, we only have about 25 liquid, right? Then obviously we would say, okay, we got to go back to council because we don't want to have to sell something to make liquid. So we balance those things at the time of budget. And then obviously the the return is the last thing. In the return, that's why we get 2 to 3 quotes, before we pull the trigger. So that's concerning the competitive return. And so that's the purpose of the portfolio. And so we go to the next slide. That's the scope. Scope of it is a little bit in terms of what I mentioned. The purpose of it, the scope of it, what we can and cannot invest in. The objectives, the 3 big guys, in protection of your principal, making sure that you have enough liquid for your cash flows, and then obviously the return is the third guy you're looking at. Dave and I have a cash flow model that we use every year. So essentially when we approve our budget, right, we take our portfolio and then we take our annual budget and we look at that cash flow model. So, and I don't know, do we have another slide? So I think that was pretty much it. And so then the policy has other things too, like accounting rules, custodial third-party rules. It's got a lot of rules in there that you have to follow in terms of making sure that the cities and portfolio is being protected.
Well, I have a few comments. So the Form 700s, which the policy refers to, and I know some residents have asked for that. I don't see them posted at the city's website. And then another section talked essentially about the city's checkbook. And in the past, vendor payments were posted, or you call them the city's vendor payments. And I personally think that's important for transparency. Some entities, they go through the governing body. They may or may not read them, but they go to them.
I think I may be misunderstanding. Is this?
Yeah, it's in the investment policy. So here on page 2, it talks about the statement of economic interest. Isn't that Form 700? And how certain, the elected officials, we know they have to do it, and then it names some staff. So I just ask, to me, that's an important public transparency to post them. And then later in this policy, it talks about essentially the city's checking account. I don't remember the exact section. Oh, here it is, safekeeping and custody. And I would like to see the vendor payments posted again, the report posted to the city's website. And you have a link for it, but it's not there.
Yeah, the safekeeping and custody section, that's what we were speaking about. The U.S. Bank is our custodial bank. It collateralizes all of our investments according to the government code. So it is safe, in that regard. The 700 form, I think that's something the city manager's office maintains. Is that right? The Form 700? Don't the
Yeah.
city members have to maintain?
Conflict of interest form 700 is provided by the city clerk.
Yeah,
She would send the form out and then she receives it as well. So that's a good question that we can take to the city clerk and get back to you.
It seems like maybe that the vendor payments, that's a separate topic. That isn't, I was thinking it was that, but it's something different.
Something different.
Okay.
And just for Form 700, that's through the California Fair Political
Yes.
Practices Commission, so I believe they are available through the FDPC, but I'll double check on where you can find them online.
I think they might be on the city clerk's page of the city's website. There might be a link. If you go to the city site under government departments, the city clerk
Okay.
is under the city manager's office.
Okay,
Yeah, I think Lynn makes a really good point. I personally would like to see not just our committee, but anybody in the city should be able to look at the check register. I was on the audit committee at a bank, and check register was there to look at. How do we do that? How do we get it so it's really easy, simplifying? If someone says, well, how much are we spending on street cleaning? Where's that? Who's the vendor? What did they get?
yeah. I don't, that's a good question, Mr. Demont. Some cities and some organizations do have their councils and boards approve the check registers at their council meetings. I don't think Miller Park does that. So that maybe, I'm not sure, Stephen, if there's something
No, they Marvin, I'm not talking about approving the check. I'm talking about being able to look at them. After they've been written.
yeah, I see.
Well, what's the point of having audit be added to our finance and audit committee
right.
if we're not actually doing anything?
True,
Yeah, and
true.
I think it's,
You have a link for it here, but there's no link. You have they used to be there, I know for a fact, but vendor payment reports, if someone would just attach them. I think it's important if someone wants to look at that.
I heard that. That may be some finance to do. We should probably start updating that link when we do our, so Yang, when we do our check register, when we pay out for vendors, it might be pretty easy just to link to the AP reports, because every time we pay a vendor, right? We run it through our AP.
Marvin, I'm not talking about just vendors. I'm talking about the checkbook,
Right. But it was everything in the past.
everything.
It looked like it was everything.
I think, I think that if I was not on the committee and someone said, no, you can't see any of the checks, I'd say, well, why?
and I just wanted to comment on the checkbook portion of it. A lot of the payment from the city goes out via ACH and
That's okay.
wire transfers. So it would be any debits that's happening.
But we can inquire on as to those, if you really were
Yeah.
curious.
I think that kind of takes us to the conversations we had regarding OpenGov transparency portal. So
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
that's
the
something on
point
the
I was
list.
gonna make. It might be something that we can consider as part of that.
Well, if
initiative.
it's a confidential payment, obviously you will maintain the confidentiality. But someone should know.
I'm not sure there would be any payments that are strictly confidential. Yeah, I would think city's perspective.
Well, a settlement maybe. An agreement to settle.
Still transparency. I don't want to know who
Yeah,
that was for
yeah,
and
I
why.
think personal information
Me
would
too.
probably be struck out, but there shouldn't be anything.
Well, why don't we look into that and see if that can be made more simplified?
I think putting that on our agenda to bring back, because we had a discussion around forming a subcommittee for that, so it could be part of that discussion that we can have once it's on the agenda.
We can take a look at it, Mr. Moise. It would take staff generating a report that would be meaningful. So in other words, if we gave you just a statement of a commercial checking account, it wouldn't be meaningful. you wouldn't see vendors, you wouldn't see, you would just see bank codes and all of this stuff. So for us to see, to put something visible like that for you, we would have to generate a report. We would have to structure a report.
What you're paying for if you don't have I have a banking account like everyone else, and I get a statement. Where's the statement? Well, maybe that would be the best thing, just look at the statement.
Well, I want to add, they used to be there and you could just print them out and look at it. A lot of them were very big buckets, like 20,000 going to pay a Visa bill. This is just an example. But it had, they were regularly run, I think, every 2 weeks. And I learned that we were paying another agency money for services we weren't getting. And I just happened to be in a position to learn about that. And that was 50,000 a year. And maybe there are others. So I bring it up because I think it's important for transparency, but it's possible there are other situations like that.
So,
Through the vice chair.
Yes.
We're on the investment policy
Right.
agenda item, so we really should
Oh,
find
okay.
a conversation to that,
Okay.
but there are upcoming items. that maybe
Okay.
that's the appropriate topic to add to your list.
Okay,
okay, well, move on. Staff liaison Adrian, are there any public comments for this particular item?
which item?
The investment policy.
Well, I was made chairman of the investment policy subcommittee,
Mhm.
and no one else was on it. And
Yes.
I notified everyone and I kept everyone informed and I got no feedback. So I just thought, no one told me when's the review due. So I submitted it on June 30th, thinking, well, maybe that's the date.
So I think the next item on the agenda is the forming of the investment subcommittee.
Well, I know, but I thought you were talking about the report. No,
So we are reviewing the investment policy, which Marvin presented, but you mentioned that there was a subcommittee and then,
right, E4 is what I thought I was commenting on review of the city's investment policy.
yeah,
E4. Well, my point is that I submitted it. But I never got any feedback. And apparently the investment policy was approved, but none of my considerations were considered. One of them was, and I think it's on the list here, that we ought to consider, I'm not saying we should, but we should consider maybe splitting our portfolio between two investment advisors and having a little competition. It was just a suggestion, but
so Mike, who did you submit it to?
all of you,
All of us?
But I think since it was not on the agenda, it could not, we could not form a formal subcommittee to
Okay,
oh,
work together to get,
we did it at the meeting.
yeah, but I think towards the end of the meeting, it was decided that we would
Yeah.
put it on the agenda to bring back.
Well,
so
someone
then
should
we
have told me
could form.
because I spent a lot of time on it.
okay.
I think it's in the meeting.
Okay, yeah, Mike, I think what happened was we talked about it at the end of the last meeting, but since the item wasn't officially on the agenda for the last meeting, we have to sort of do the formation of the subcommittee again.
Sure.
But your work is definitely not wasted because once we form the subcommittee, we can bring it on the agenda at the next meeting. Yeah, I think it's
It's a little late.
timing and.
We've
sort of-
already adopted an investment policy. So
It's an annual review.
Mhm.
it's just like the 2 pages.
But sort of. Just a question, so if we. Agree to the investment policy review. Can we still, with suggestions of the subcommittee, sort of bring that back on the agenda for changes?
Because I know we need to take the investment policy.
Before the end of the calendar year, we have to bring it to city council because the investment policy just has to be. The policy just states that it has to be reviewed annually. It doesn't say that changes must be made to it or that it has to be rewritten annually, but it must be
review.
Okay, so we've reviewed it, but we can still make changes to it. And then we can sort of, as a committee, re-review it and then bring it to the city council.
But I think the commission can recommend changes to the policy. The council has to make or adopt the changes. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
My
so-
report was simply a recommendation.
Yeah, okay, so I think we can still take your recommendations into account at our next meeting and we can still go through the process, but for this meeting, it would be just stating that we've reviewed and approved this particular version.
Okay,
All right, so I think we didn't have any public comments, is that correct?
If you would like to comment on item E4, review of the city's investment policy, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or landline, please press *9. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to staff. Seeing no hands or cards, so you may continue.
Great, staff liaison Adrian, could you please state the motion?
See, motion to recommend receipt of the city's investment policy by city council.
Okay, so I'll put forth the motion that we have received the investment policy and we've looked at it. Is there anyone who would second that? Great, Jeff seconds it. Are we in agreement? We've received and reviewed. I guess the motion is passed. Moving on to a related topic, topic 5, E5, which is to consider forming an investment policy subcommittee. Management analyst Adrian Patino, could you introduce the item?
Certainly. So as we kind of touched on previously at the last meeting, the Finance and Audit Commission was reviewing the existing work plan and voted to create a subcommittee to review the investment policy consisting of Commissioner DeMoss. However, because this item was not on the agenda for formal consideration, the action was therefore not in compliance with the Brown Act. So we're bringing back that item tonight for formal consideration by the Finance and Audit Commission. One other item of note is that a subcommittee may not be comprised of more than 3 members so as to avoid a quorum in violation of the Brown Act.
Just a more general question, since we have new commissioners, could you talk a little bit about how the subcommittees work, how they should meet and how they should be bringing things to the broader Finance and Audit Committee?
Yeah, so subcommittees are the more sort of free-form of subgroup of the Finance and Audit Commission that are focused around like a particular area. So in this case, it would be around the investment policy, and they would really be deciding amongst themselves how they would like to approach that topic, and they can bring back any findings or recommendations by going through the chair and bringing back reports as an agendized item at any regular or special meetings of the commission.
So when you say bring back a report, what you had prepared would be an example of that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, or like a presentation of, what
Gotcha.
kind of, findings or.
okay, so there's no
What-
specific format necessarily or structure that has to be followed. Okay,
The key is that results of research undertaken by a subcommittee are presented in the open session here. They're not
Right.
shared in advance via email with other non-committee members.
Uh,
Subcommittee members, however, you can work together and decide when you meet, how often you meet, that's up to you, but then together as a subcommittee, you bring back your findings to the full commission
okay.
in this meeting.
And so the charge of this specific subcommittee is broadly to review investment policy. So every aspect of that, there's not some narrower focus or mandate specific to that. It's just the broad investment policy analysis.
That's the annual investment policy.
That's
review,
it?
so it's-
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's driven by the fact that it's on your work plan. So any subcommittees that are formed based on what's on your work plan.
Okay. Thank you.
So, any other questions on the formation of the investment policy subcommittee?
How do I participate?
Oh, so right now I think, Mike is the chair of that, and, as, city staff have explained, we can't have more than 3 people in that subcommittee. So you and Mike would be 2, probably that subcommittee could use another member if there's anyone interested.
So we will need a vote to form the subcommittee.
Okay.
So,
So can I present a motion to form the subcommittee? I don't want to be on that particular subcommittee, but there are other things I'm interested in. But can I make that motion?
Sure, of
Okay.
course.
Also
I'll-
deciding.
I can second the motion.
Motion is seconded. All in agreement of forming an investment subcommittee chaired by Mike with Jeff on as well?
Aye.
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 Okay, well, motion is passed. And I think with that, we can move on to the final topic for tonight, which is to review the work plan that is attached. So can I have management analyst Adrian Patino introduce that item?
Thank you. Moving on to review of the work plan. So the city council policy which governs commissions states that each commission must develop an annual work plan, which is kind of like the foundation of the work that is performed by the advisory body in support of the city council's annual work plan. So these work plans are once finalized by the commission and with a majority vote are formally presented to the city council for direction and approval no later than September 30th of each year. And regular updates on these work plan items are made to city council throughout the year. We usually recommend it to be twice a year. So the previous approved work plan had 3 approved items, which are up on the screen here in this top box, which include review of the annual investment policy, the annual independent auditors report review, as well as OpenGov transparency portal improvements. A couple of items that staff could provide as possible suggestions to add to the work plan would be a review of the scope and process of the city's audit for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Understanding how the audit is conducted, what the scope of that is, how the actual audit process is undertaken in coordination with the city's outside auditor as well as internal staff. And then another possible item that staff has kind of come up with is review of the actuarial other post-employment benefits or OPEB valuation, which is related to pensions and pension costs. And we have another outside expert advisor who we will be able to pull in additionally along with staff resources to help present to the commission and provide information around that item as well.
Adrian, I'm just a little bit confused here. So I see 3 items here and tonight was number 1, basically. And the independent auditors report, I forget the timing for that, but it sounded like you were naming some additional topics that went beyond this 3 here. They were somewhat related, but what kind of wiggle room isn't the right word? Maybe in a recorded meeting with But what kind of leeway and flexibility is there related to these approved projects? Because I have some I would, want to ask about if that would be appropriate. But what is the leeway here?
Yeah, so what we are providing the opportunity for tonight is to look at the existing approved projects and also think about adding other projects that the commission might be interested in to seek council approval to add to a work plan for the upcoming calendar year.
And Adrian,
Okay.
could we review the four authorized areas that council had authorized? I think that might help in terms of, understanding where the projects have to fit within those guidelines. I think you had a slide where there was the,
Right. It was your
Yeah.
onboarding the things.
So the
perfect, yeah.
priorities of the commission are review the process for periodic financial reporting to city council. So that includes things like the investment report that we presented tonight. Review of the financial audit and annual financial report with the city's external auditors. So that is includes things like the ACFR, which is the annual comprehensive financial report. And then review of the resolution of prior year audit findings. So that is essentially what the auditor's report finding the reviewing the material differences with any other findings. And then review of the auditor selection process and scope as needed. So that is when the city agreement with its external auditor is up for renewal and the city is seeking new audit services.
What has gone on with approved project 3? Can someone give me an update?
So there hasn't been a lot that's gone on. I think at the last meeting, we were going to form a subcommittee with me and Matt on, because we initially did do some work on just the open gov transparency. But obviously that topic isn't on the agenda tonight, so we'll have to come and form the subcommittee next time. And then hopefully we'll have members working on that and coming back with a report and recommendations.
Well, I just heard Adrian say we're talking about reviewing the work plan, and I see 3 projects here, and you suggested 2 more if I have that right. So I guess in a bigger picture, is this then a general discussion of the work plan, or because it almost seems like that?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably more of a general discussion, and I think the main thing is just assessing how much capacity we have as a committee
I
to
see.
work on these projects, because there are that many members, and
Yes.
once we form subcommittees, we'll have
Right.
additional time for the subcommittees. But if there is no appetite among members to really work on these projects, then we can add a lot on, but there's not going to be much progress.
But would it be appropriate to mention some other possible
Yes.
projects? So I guess that's what I'm trying to find out. Is this when we express our interest and what? Okay.
Yeah, and I think we can also maybe talk through some of the parking lot items, because
Okay.
there are already a bunch of
Yes.
different things. But yeah, I think.
So just referring back to the advisory body handbook, so there's a section on the work plan. Or the advisory body is required to develop an annual work plan that supports the goals of the city council. So just keeping in mind that we know what the goals are, and if we're up for just getting our annual work plan in place, then that's when it would be official, because it needs to go through consultative vote.
If I can make a small comment to the commission, like on the approved projects, like items 1 and 2 is part of your ongoing responsibility. So it shouldn't really be listed as a project. So it's part of your ongoing responsibilities. So number 3 obviously would be a project. As Ronnie and I know, we have a goal of trying to get our open gov reports transparent on a monthly basis. So But item 1 and 2 is already part of your ongoing. It shouldn't really be listed as a project.
Okay.
So on this particular item, given, we have Jeff and Lynn who are relatively new and this is their first meeting, I
No,
do
it's
want to,
not. It's my first meeting sitting here, but I went for about 2.5 years.
okay.
Before the pandemic.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether maybe we should do a broader discussion on the work plan, maybe either at a special meeting or the next meeting. Or do we want to try to also get through it this evening?
Yeah, and I've got a couple of thoughts too that I wanted to add on to for the work plan whenever the time is appropriate. So if we need more time and you want to do a special meeting, I would be in favor of that. Or if you think we can get through it all now, we can charge it out.
Because obviously tonight we've had a lot of new information and I do want to give everyone a chance to maybe go back and have a look at what, is already here and think through if there are new things we want to add.
I would like to hear Adrian again say your projects. I think personally, it'd be good to have a special meeting maybe, but could you say again what you suggested, just so I get them down here?
Yeah, so the 2 possible additions that
Okay.
Staff was
Is that in here?
proposing for the commission review were review the
here it is.
scope and the process of the audit for fiscal year 2022-2023, and then review of the actuarial other post-employment benefits OPEB evaluation.
Okay.
So if we were to have a special meeting dedicated to working through this work plan, how would we put that on the calendar?
Yes, so we would need to have a quorum of the Finance and Audit Commission to hold a special meeting, and staff can help coordinate to find a date or find possible options of dates that the commission could hold a special meeting. And then we would coordinate with you to set the agenda items for that special meeting.
Okay.
There's 2 things to consider. If we are, it definitely needs to be on the agenda to be discussed if we're changing anything on the work plan. Right, tonight's meeting, it's all about reviewing what we have.
Okay.
So if we're bringing it back, if it's to come back as an agenda item, whether it's a special meeting or a regular meeting, and then we or the commission has to present it to the council for feedback and for approval. So maybe just the timeline. So, when we have the next commission meetings, and then when we want to have a special meeting or wait till our next regular meeting so that we can time it that way. So it goes out to council. But I don't think any subcommittees can be formed till that work plan is adopted by the council.
But the investment committee is okay.
Yes,
So it's just other.
it's already on the work,
Yeah.
on the current work plan.
Well, I thought I heard Marvin say the work plans have to be completed by September. So the next formal meeting is October 19th, if I understand this correctly.
Yeah, so we will need a special
Yes.
meeting and not wait for the regular meeting if we want to really add new items to the work plan.
How quickly do you think we could schedule the special meeting just so that we don't lose momentum? Like, is this something we can do the next couple of weeks, few weeks, like what sort of advance notice do we need to do?
Get out our phones.
I'm fairly open the next couple of weeks, and I think part of it really is just, getting everyone's time to sit down.
Yes, sometime next week is fine.
Do you guys think we can grind something out in about 15 minutes?
No.
It's not the on the
yeah.
agenda, so. I don't think we can.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure this is considered and we're not just, throwing things out and not having time to really go through whether we feel it's a priority and to look through the criteria that we've been set out. So I do want to
Appreciate that.
spend a little time because this is going to be our work plan
Yes.
for the coming
Right.
couple of, 12 months and maybe beyond.
Okay.
Okay.
Next Thursday works for me too.
Likewise.
Can I make a suggestion on
Yes.
scheduling?
Okay.
We need to just find out what facilities are available.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
what we would probably do is just Adrian would reach out and do the scheduling on our
Okay.
end. Just because there's lots of competing.
Bring this over to my house.
And then,
Let's do it. Let's just do it at the BBC.
That's it.
there you go. And also to make sure that we have enough time to post the agendas.
Yes,
So that we have that also.
Yeah, and we also have to make sure that we're not conflicting with any other advisory bodies or city council meetings.
Mhm.
But just one quick clarification on the agenda that needs to go out for the special meeting. It just needs to specify that the topic is to review the work plan. It does not need to specify the specific potential projects to be put on the work plan on the agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
But I think a better topic would be discuss the 23-24 work plan. Wouldn't it? If you're not reviewing something, you're kind of.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Finalize, finalize for approval or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, my question was more, around the specificity of what needs to be put on the agenda. If it includes the specific proposed projects or just the topic itself.
And then I guess at the end of that meeting, hopefully we'll have, our projects set out and then we can, as a team, approve it and move forward.
Would it help the commission if, on the parking lot items, if we submit to you, maybe a couple of sentences or paragraphs on those items in terms of our position, staff's position on whether they should be considered? Would it help you guys to receive that?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, and also Adrian's 2 additional topics, if you could just, a couple of bullet points saying, the staff's recommendation of priority, why the staff believes this is an important topic. I think that would help guide us too.
Perfect.
Now, these parking lot items, can we add to it, or is this like, just going to the council meetings, you hear about things that some help could possibly be needed. So should we send those to Adrian or what? I'm not talking about an extensive list, but if we have a few items, should we send them to you for consideration, or how should we do that?
I think that can be part of the.
Okay,
special
prepare
meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then on this review of the work plan, I guess, Adrian, you still have to see if there are any public comments on this one.
If you would like to make a public comment on agenda item E6, review the work plan, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing into a cell phone or landline, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to staff. And I'm seeing no hands cards.
Okay, so on this one, I believe the motion really is for us to set up a special meeting to further discuss and consider the work plan. So I will state that as the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So I think the last part is informational items. Informational items are transmitted to the advisory body in the staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the advisory body. Informational items are not action items. However, an advisory body member, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. Do we have any public comment on the presentations and proclamations? Which looks like just the schedule of upcoming meetings.
Yes, if you'd like to make a public comment on agenda item F1, Finance and Audit Committee, the Finance and Audit Commission regular meetings, please engage the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, press *9 or complete a speaker card and return it to staff. And I've seen no hands or cards at this time.
Okay, then, I guess we are able to adjourn today's meeting.
I have a question,
Sure.
and I'd happily ask it after we adjourn, but I just want to do things properly. So it's really a theoretical question about AI and the application with respect to city data. Is that something that we should talk offline as a committee, or is that something we have to discuss?
So we can't really talk about anything offline as a committee,
Ah.
but we can probably talk about it at our special work plan meeting
Perfect.
if we want to put something
Yes,
on the agenda on
Okay.
that topic.
sounds good.
Yeah, and Chair Wong, I had one other question that also is obviously off the agenda, but, and maybe we can consider this for the special meeting, but I wanted to get your thoughts well, really the broader group's thoughts on whether we want to increase the frequency of our meetings. I know it's quarterly and it just seems like, if we wanted to keep momentum on some of these items, whether we wanted to do that every other month or monthly and sort of, I guess maybe my question is back to the city around sort of what is the process if the committee decides they want to increase the frequency, what is the process to effectuate that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm curious as to how frequently other committees are meeting, because once a quarter is not really sufficient time to move any projects forward.
Well, this committee used to meet monthly
Okay.
when I used to attend it, and I would say if it's kind of like you're reporting, there are subcommittees doing work and you're reporting on progress. I agree, more frequent meetings would be better. If that's the focus, not just meetings to meet.
So just agenda management, we
Yes.
can actually work with the chair to
Okay.
place that on a future discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do that.
And so this concept of AI and Menlo Park city data, et cetera, and the utilization of that. I just, and that'll be on the agenda, and whether or not it's specifically listed, it'll be part of the conversation, correct?
Yes, we can
Okay.
definitely talk about it when we
Okay.
talk about the work plan, and maybe for that special meeting, we'll have two items. First item, frequency of meetings, and then second item, we can. talk
So
about
for
the
the
work.
city staff, in advance of that, my question would be, are there any current AI projects underway with respect to improving management of not just our finances, but of any other aspect of the operating business itself? I have access to a variety of AI frameworks, and so I do a lot of work in this area. And so I understand some of the potential use cases. So I would be interested in discussing, what is the potential for this committee to participate in that? If there was something that I was allowed to facilitate at no charge to the city, would that be of use? That's all, so that kind of topic area.
I think it's definitely
Okay.
something we can chat about
Okay.
on the work plan
Okay,
meeting.
I just wanted to give everybody a heads up.
Yeah, thank you.
Can put my little propeller back.
Right. Well, I think we met everyone but you, so.
Hi, sorry I was late. My name is Ying Chen, senior accountant at the city of Menlo Park. I've been with city about 5 years.
Great. Nice to meet you. You normally come to these
Yeah.
meetings.
It's
Okay,
just maybe twice.
okay.
So Adrian, I'll probably just reach out to you to make sure I understand the logistics of the special meeting and kind of work on a schedule and agenda.
Yeah.
Do you have an adjournment time for the meeting?
I
just
think it
officially
was
adjourned.
7:35.
Okay.
Oh, I looked at my watch when you said it. Is that good enough?
Maybe we just
7:35?
adjourn it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was adjourned. I heard a lot of questions.